Okay. Hey, everybody. We'll be talking about Venmo today during our product teardown. Thanks for joining. I'm Katarina. Kashmir will be taking notes on the Venmo, on the Jamboard, and we'll be sharing the Venmo Jamboard in the group and probably on LinkedIn as well. So just high-level rules. If you haven't joined one of these before, please be present. It's nicer for us if you can turn on your camera, because then we have faces to respond to. But please mute unless you're talking. Sometimes there's just background noises. And given the size of our group, it's helpful if you can raise your hand to talk. And then, this is really a discussion. It's not an interview, so it's a good place to just run ideas by each other. So if you have a thought that you're not quite sure if this is like a solid answer, it's okay to bring it up, and we'll just get other people's thoughts too, and we can refine our thinking together. And then again, in the interest of time, if everybody's got the same +1, you can also use the chat to do that. Oh, Michelle, yeah, sure. You can try the note-taking app. It'll be interesting to see how they work, how good they are. Thanks for asking. All right. Welcome again, everybody. We're just going to get started. So Venmo, hopefully all of you are familiar with Venmo, at least from the app perspective, the social payments aspect. One of the things that's kind of interesting is looking at it from the business, if you worked at Venmo, looking at that perspective, which is why here I asked, if you have time, you haven't had a chance, please check out their website and see what you think their mission is and what they currently offer. It's more than just the social sharing aspect. So with that, we'll go to the first slide. Does anybody want to take a stab at what is Venmo's mission?
So what I just found online is that its mission is to improve people's relationship with money and each other. That's what I just read.
I also saw Michelle mentioned is to change people's relationship with money and each. Yeah, okay, that's what you said. When I was searching through this, I think they've changed a couple times. If you look back at, you look at different sources. So can we get more specific than to just change people's relationship with money? Is it for a specific direction? Michelle?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that they worded it that way, because normally the first thing you think is it makes it easier to transfer money from one person to the other, right? Using your smartphones. But this idea of changing people's relationships with money and each other, I feel like opens up Venmo's mission to not just be that transaction between one person and another, but it's unclear, it's a little blurry on what exactly that means. What about people's relationships with money do they want to change? They don't exactly answer that, but they say it's working because people love using Venmo. So leveraging whatever magic Venmo has. The seamless use and convenience.
So I see on another one which says it's a digital wallet, and I can make a direct analogy to just how before we had credit cards and whatever, we used to just open our wallets and pay for whatever. So that's literally what we're doing here. But then at the same time, there were other apps as well that were doing the same thing. But
maybe just anecdotally, and it's totally okay if more people want to give your just anecdotal thoughts. And when you use Venmo, what do you think is different about it versus handing someone a credit card? Is there something that makes Venmo special?
It's convenient.
Okay, convenience.
And to get deeper into that sentiment, it's on your phone, it's glued to your everyday life, so it's ingrained with everything you're already using and doing.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
Go ahead.
I saw Shruti posted the vision to become the go-to platform for money transfer and empower users to operate money with their fingertips. So definitely that's consistent with the convenience aspect. Someone else started talking.
Yeah, there's one thing that when I started using Venmo, I was always wondering why we need this, because PayPal does exactly the same thing. And one thing I actually don't like about, I know I'm getting into the next one, is I can, even if I have just used Venmo for money transfer to a random person one time, I can actually see what they're doing, who they're paying and for what. And I don't like that.
Yeah, you definitely highlighted something that's very unique about Venmo when it first launched compared to PayPal or other just digital wallets like, Apple Pay, Google Pay. They don't have this feed, right? Venmo has introduced this new feature where complete with emojis, right? When you start to type what the memo, essentially memo field of what this payment was for, they suggest a lot of emojis. Like if you say lunch, there's a bunch of different like eating emojis that you can include. And you can choose if you want that transaction to be private or public. I think maybe depending on what we're used to, that can feel fun for some people and maybe oversharing for some other people. So yeah, they definitely wanted to bring the social, like emphasize the social in the payments. I don't know how well that's worked for them. It may be a generational thing. I'm not so into it. I tried it for a little bit with the emojis, but I just didn't feel like it was my style, depending on what the transaction was. Was it really between friends or if it was more of like a business transaction? So we talked about Venmo's mission and vision. I guess like the goal is kind of related. And we also talked about what it is or has been, right? Like the social peer-to-peer transactions. Like it seems like a common use case is you pay people back for like a friend back, right? Is there any other so when we talk about what it is currently, beyond that, what is it currently?
When you say what is it, what do we look at it as, or?
Yeah, what do you think of Venmo as? And then, so I think there's two aspects. There's like what is commonly known as, and then there's what is its current range of offerings? Because we'll need to know that before we can talk about where it can go in the future.
So I see it just really as a money transfer tool.
A money transfer tool. Mm-hmm.
And they've kind of expanded into debit cards, which I didn't realize until I started looking for this call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have a MasterCard, I think.
They do, and they have a teen version and an adult version. So now they're branching into different age demographics.
And they also have a product called Insights, which helps break down your spending habits and how you're, budgeting or saving or spending money, which reminds me of Mint. Mint was kind of the pioneer years ago and really breaking down and giving you a roadmap of like how you're spending money, how you can save, levers, etc.
Yeah, and I was just looking at the app and it seems like you could also buy crypto on Venmo.
Yes, I saw that recently, or actually it was some time ago. Has anybody tried it? Crypto on Venmo?
I've not tried crypto anywhere.
Yeah.
I think it might be emphasized less now that I feel like the peak of crypto excitement has passed. But yeah, they definitely look like they've been expanding beyond their core product. And yeah, it's also been acquired by PayPal. Or I mean, it was several years ago, but that might also change its dynamics. So,
Katrina, just a quick question. Where should I which?
Oh, you can put all these new sticky notes on the what is it currently?
Okay.
So yeah, so we have it allows they've expanded beyond the essentially peer-to-peer social money transfer product, which they started with. I think somebody mentioned they had the debit card, and there might have been, oh, I think there was the insights, right? Kind of the mint style products. Deepanjan, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. How do you say your name?
You got it just right.
Okay.
I was gonna say, as part of the product offerings, I went on the website, actually not the app. I use the app a lot, so I thought maybe you could see something different. They've also allowing for direct deposit, which kind of also is a play a little bit in the earned wage access category, like apps like Earnin. I don't know how many people like are familiar here, but they're allowing you to get your paycheck couple days early. So yeah, that I think that's another area I think beyond just peer-to-peer payments they've ventured into, along with other things that were just mentioned.
Okay, so they're expanding on the business side, so to allow people to receive payments from a business as sort of an employee or contractor.
Their own paychecks.
So,
So
their own paychecks. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's like a short-term loan. So you maybe get a little bit faster than.
just a tiny bit, yeah. It's
okay.
like 2 or 3 days early, I think, like direct deposit if you link it.
Mhm.
So instead
Yeah,
of going to
payday.
Chase, I think it can go to something like a Venmo account.
Got it. And then Shruti also mentioned the local money transfer. So this is, yeah, maybe they'll give what is it, Western Union, some competition in the future. And then you can schedule reminders to ask and receive payments and not just like after the fact. We are kind of just to try to keep this organized. Appreciate Shruti, you want to edit. Can you just put in the chat, and then I think Kashmir will catch up.
So one question, so Manoj mentioned payday loans. Is that similar to what Dipanjan was saying, or?
Yeah, I was trying to say that I think that's what Dipanjan, that offering is sometimes categorized as,
Yeah.
you get, it's factoring your, it's kind of like in businesses, they factor receivables. This is kind of factoring your paycheck. And so they take a cut off it, but you get it early.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. I think I saw Michelle had her hand up.
Yeah, I was just starting to type it inside. Extending on that crypto, like I just saw that I never tapped on crypto in Venmo before, but now that I did, I saw that it gives some education about it, getting started with crypto, understanding volatility and risk and what is crypto. I think that tells me that is maybe what they mean about changing changing people's relationships with money, like making it more comfortable, like making it a more positive relationship so that people understand and are comfortable getting into crypto and getting into all these payment systems, which I feel like is also a potential to expand, what their offering is. Do they want to teach people more about money and those transactions so that they're more comfortable using and doing more transactions?
So maybe democratizing access to different financial instruments. If you
Right.
want to go very
Through
abstract.
education.
Education, yeah, financial
And
literacy.
to build on what Michelle was saying, I was thinking the same thing around like they're implementing all these like educational resources to like inform you of like how to save more, how to buy crypto, and like really guiding you through the process so you don't feel alone, and therefore ideally you end up coming out with a more positive mindset and relationship with not only your money but also like Venmo's offerings.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that'll be a really interesting branch for them to expand into. So what category is Venmo? If you go to the traditional B2B, B2C, B2B2C route. I know some people have previously said C2C, but they don't really make money on the pure transfers.
B2C for sure. Individuals use it.
Okay, B2C, B2B2C. Can you elaborate more on, so B2C is which aspect of Venmo?
Such as the individuals using the app to do individual transfers, right?
Like between like me and you, if we went out for lunch and I paid you back?
Yeah.
Or something else?
So I think one use case for B2C would be where you're paying for their services that you have received from that business, right?
Yes. Yeah, they recently also they're expanding their their business profiles. So they are accepting tap to pay from people's wallets. So definitely investing more on the business side. Michelle said B2B2C. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, I think leveraging the partnerships that they're having, as well as working with merchants, although I'm not as clear on that side, but just their partnerships with financial institutions and, pulling off of transaction fees with the credit cards that they're making deals with. As well as small businesses that they're working with, although it's not clear from a consumer side which small businesses they're working with. It looks like you can be able to pay businesses directly through Venmo as well.
Yeah. So I think they're still working on that aspect, like getting the word out. Manoj. Oh, you have your hand.
Just going to say that they also have the classic from a business model is that PayPal float. So, there's money lying in your wallets that constitutes float that they can earn some interest on, and that becomes low cost financing for them in a way that they can then perhaps use to extend those, other financial products. So the cost of capital becomes lower because they have float lying in the wallets in the form of the funds lying in people's wallets.
Yeah, that's a good observation. If a friend pays you, it doesn't go straight to your bank account, right? It just kind of sits around. Venmo still has your money. They've just now assigned it to your account. And I'm not sure if this happened to anybody else, but if you want to pay somebody and your Venmo balance isn't enough, they don't seem to split the transaction. They don't seem to let you pay like a portion with your Venmo balance and the remainder from your bank account. They just take the whole thing out of your bank account. So it just seems to increase their money under management.
That's an interesting take. And then I would also add, I think they charge, just in terms of business model, for the B2C transactions, they charge a fee, and that's a monetization for them. Like if you do a C2C transfer, there's no fee taken, but from the B2C transactions, I think they take a cut, and in response, they provide the credit card like protections around as a consumer, you can always say, look, this was a fraud, the provider did not provide the service, and they'll give you the money back guarantee and all. But I think they charge a fee for those B2C transactions along the lines of credit cards. And I think maybe someone had already mentioned that. So that's the other business model.
Yeah. I think this now we have a kind of segue into the business model. Like, how do they make money? You mentioned the float. The money that's just sitting in their accounts. They can make interest off of that. They could, put it somewhere else. They may be financing other loans or transactions. How else I think people may have touched on this, but maybe we can go over it again so Kashmir can get the stickies up there. How are they making money if it's not from the peer-to-peer transfers?
Two things. So one is transferring the money that you get from Venmo to the bank account. So Venmo charges a processing fee through which Venmo earns the money. Second being, I believe Venmo credit. I don't know how many used it. Like you can borrow some amount of money from Venmo in order to pay somebody if you're short of funds. So Venmo also has that, which has a processing fee.
Okay, so we have is this the same as what Michelle just mentioned about the credit card fee?
I don't know about the credit card. I mean, like I use Venmo often. I know that Venmo has a debit card. I believe what she's mentioning is Venmo credit. But
Yeah,
I was also talking about Venmo credit.
debit. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's not in the form of a card. It's
right.
just called Venmo credit.
I think there's some kind of merchant fee. The rate may be slightly different. Like the tap to pay, I think is slightly less than 3%. I think it's like 2.9 plus some fixed number of cents. Poonam. Poonam.
They also have this, like when you're transferring money out of your balance, you're prompted with an option to select like the normal time frame of like a couple business days, or there is an instant transfer option where you're assessed like a percentage or a flat fee of some sort, basically, and they get a whatever, like if I'm transferring $10 to my bank account and I want it in my account right away, I think they'll take like 1% of that or something
Yeah.
small. So they probably earn money in that way as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of fees for speeding things up or just more for convenience. All right. Moving on to the next, now that we have talked about just like what it is like on the high level, like business, basic understanding of the business, let's talk about the personas. Like who are the people who are using Venmo or who would like to use Venmo?
Definitely a younger generation because it's so playful that you can imagine people in college are a good market.
Yeah, so the younger generation.
Mhm.
Because it's playfulness, maybe the emoji aspect.
Exactly. And the feed, I would think the younger generations think it's funny to see what their friends are like sharing with each other, the emojis and things that they're using.
Yes, yes. Maybe there's some witty way to express something that would otherwise be pretty boring, like a pretty boring transaction, paying back for rent, but maybe we can do
Like
something funny.
inside jokes that they get. I've seen families using it, so looks like it's a convenient way for like siblings in different locales to share money.
I think it's generally there's a lot of uptake between people who are very active in the community and have a lot of transactional need, right? So typically like people who go out for parties, they typically end up splitting and they would then pay out the balance on Venmo. That seems to be a very prevalent use case on Venmo.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The people who are in situations where they end up splitting costs more often. Michelle mentioned side gig users. Sneha has folks who have frequent transactions with each other, flatmates, college and work friends. Oh, babysitters. Oh, that's really interesting. Maybe it's like, is it because of the younger generation aspect, Michelle?
Yeah, well, I wanted to stop having to make sure I had cash to pay babysitters, and it was just easier when usually babysitters that age range usually has Venmo, so that was just the easiest, and that's why I also expanded that to side gig users. Anybody who does have side gigs, even small businesses or users who just have small transactions with each other, it's easier to pay them through Venmo.
Yeah, I think my hairdresser, my cleaners, they all accept Venmo because they don't want the credit card fees, and I don't have cash on hand. So I think it's a good alternate to cash itself. And I actually had a question for Shruti where she's saying folks who have frequent transactions with each other. So I'm just wondering if anybody knows if, like with banks, we are able to set up auto payment of whatever, right? This fixed amount. So if flatmates have, let's say they're sharing rent or something, is that a feature that they have that you can just set up auto pay?
Maybe
Uh,
Zelle. Zelle is, you could
Mm.
set it up to be monthly to transfer money.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Right now, we don't have it. That's an interesting case that you just made. So it's possible to instantly, transfer money on a need be basis, but there is no way that you can schedule auto payment. Like that's the way Venmo makes money, right? So if I do instant transfer, it just transfers the money and charges you some processing fee. If it's a standard transfer, it takes anywhere between 5 to 7 business days, and I believe it's free.
Yeah, I'm definitely hearing people who don't have cash on hand. It's definitely a persona. There are some parts of the world where cash is still king. It's common to carry a lot of cash around your wallet, but in a society where we are mostly cashless, I think maybe the pandemic accelerated this with the coin shortage and such, and not wanting to touch cash. It's become more and more prominent. What about partnerships? Right now, we've been talking mostly about like the consumer aspect, maybe small business.
I haven't used this functionality myself, but I remember years ago going into, I think like H&M, and Venmo knew I was like near an H&M or something. They were like, oh, do you want to pay through Venmo? And that's when I realized, oh, neat. If I'm shopping at a store in person, I can pay through my phone. Obviously, we can use Apple Pay now, which I think has kind of like become the more like leveraged option. But I think the broader thing that comes to mind for me when we got to this part of the Jamboard is being digital friendly. So this is meant for someone who wants just like optimize for convenience, just only have their phone on them. They don't ever need their wallet truly. So someone that really believes in like being wallet free in that sense, wherever you are.
Yes, definitely the leaning into the convenience aspect. Shruti mentioned very few e-commerce stores.
Yeah, Shein, some e-commerce stores accept Venmo these days. Like you can directly pay through Venmo.
I recently saw a
Venmo
promotion with Amazon. I'm not sure if any of you saw that.
Oh, I didn't know
I
that.
think it may be like a slow rollout, a small test. That if you connect your Venmo account to Amazon, I think they give you some discount, like a one-time use discount.
Great.
Pearl wrote, it can be a buyer persona's payment gateway use case. For example, Splitwise has an option to direct pay the user on their associated Venmo account. Yeah, so Splitwise can also be a partner.
What's Splitwise again? What did we do?
Pearl, do you want to answer what is Splitwise?
I think it allows you to split the costs. So essentially, like, let's say if you end up going as a party of 5 and you paid the bill, let's say in a restaurant, you can charge it in such you can split the bill equally and then charge, like, request money from all of your friends. And if they have their Splitwise account, they will end up like giving you that money, so that it becomes very easy to split whenever you are like, incurring charges on a group basis.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, so let's talk about the competition. Who else is in the Venmo space?
Zelle.
Yes.
PayPal as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting given PayPal owns Venmo.
Is Messenger Pay still a thing?
Messenger Pay.
I don't know the right term, but
I know it is called Messenger Pay, but nobody seems to be using it anymore.
yeah.
Is it different from the Meta Pay?
Oh, Meta Pay. Maybe that's
It maybe got rebranded. Maybe that's why. But basically, it's being able to pay your Messenger contacts.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So Amazon Pay, Zelle. I think you might be able to. Pearl mentioned Splitwise.
Oh, there's Google Pay as well.
We forgot, yeah, the most important one. That's what I wrote down.
Google Pay?
Yeah, Google Pay. Basically, every big tech company has a way to pay people.
Yeah, some of these might actually, it's interesting because they are kind of competition, but also maybe partners, depending on which aspect of Venmo. Like when Venmo launched their tap to pay, they can accept payments from Apple Pay, Google Pay, right? But they're kind of competing, but they're kind of partners. Credit cards, yeah. any
I have
alternative.
a question. Why do you say Splitwise is a competitor for Venmo? Because it just allows you to split payments and yes, of course, pay your friend, but do you mean it would be an indirect competitor as opposed to a direct competitor?
I think of it as indirect because you don't really need Venmo. I mean, you could use Splitwise without ever using Venmo.
Okay.
But
So-
I think
so
it's like
indirect.
there's an overlap, right? Because they could work well together.
Got it.
I think what's interesting about this space is that majority, if not all of these companies in the space, they leverage the Plaid API, which is what allows all these banks and merchants in the marketplace to speak to each other. So
So
they're
that's a winner.
using very similar infrastructure. It's just a matter of like, which brand does the person trust and identify with the most?
Yeah, and I think that's for a good reason, right? Like we are talking about financial transactions. We want to make sure that the security, all the latest standards are in place. And definitely you want to have like a trusted partner out there for that. So I do think that there is a reason why we see a consolidation of that infrastructure out there. Like if you think about Plaid, Stripe, and so on, I think these are like typically the market leaders because they're so good in what they have been doing.
Yeah, there are a few other companies here in the chat. I'm in the interest of time, I'm just going to move to the next slide. But yeah, they definitely there's a lot going on in this space. What do you think are Venmo's strengths?
Their UI is very simple. It takes
Simple
just
UI.
clicks to transact.
I think it is fun. I mean, if you go to the Venmo app, it doesn't seem like, you are dealing with, like, if you go to your bank app and look at the transactions, you get a very different feel than what you would look at in a Venmo feed. I think it's like fun. It just takes away that boring or the seriousness aspect of the money part. Keeps it simple, keeps it fun.
And they also like pioneered like socializing the act of paying someone. So earlier we were talking about like the feed and the emojis and the memos you can include. I think they're the first company to start that sort of trend around it.
Social aspect. Shital, thanks for raising your hand.
Oh, yeah, and I was gonna say, given that this requires folks to be on the platform, I think one of the key advantages they have right now is market share, right? They have real leading market share amongst all the other, or most of the other competitors, and top of mind for the user too.
Yeah, so you mentioned market share. There is definitely a network effect here, right? Because if one person has it but nobody else has it, it's not very useful. So that's a very good point. I thought I saw Barbara's hand up.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say the same thing that Sheeta was saying about the market share and the networking, and also the fact that Venmo's been around, right, for like over 10 years, I think 12, 13 years. So a lot of people, even if they're not using it, they know what Venmo is.
Yes. So there's that trust aspect Michelle also mentioned.
I think the focus on the mobile device or that app also had a lot to do. I mean, because it's so much more convenient. Everyone now has a smartphone, and it just becomes so much easier to do a cash transfer as opposed to go to your bank account and do that.
Yeah, there's a very strong convenience aspect. All right, so well, just to answer like a sort of key question, is this a painkiller or vitamin? I'm not sure. Just a reminder what the analogy is. Is it like an essential aspect of people's lives, or is it just kind of like a nice to have enhancement of their life? You know?
It depends on the person. I think for someone like myself who truly never has cash on them, I like to avoid my wallet if I can. I think it's kind of essential. But then someone like my dad, his life goes on without any of these sort of applications. I think it depends on the demographic.
All right, so it's a painkiller for some demographics and maybe a vitamin for others. Barbara?
Yes, I agree. I don't think it's a vitamin necessarily, because there are other competitors. The only difference to me is security wise. There's some, so for example, like Zelle, right? Like Zelle, there's not that you don't need to have the app necessarily to do a transaction. You have to have a bank account. You don't necessarily have to have a bank account, but it's not, the money is going to be transferred. There is no, no one's getting, at least there hasn't been any recent news about security, losing your information or being hacked, your information being hacked. So I don't think it's a, I think it's a good to have as an additional option, like Google Pay or MetaPay or PayPal.
Yeah, got it. So weaknesses. I think we started to touch upon it. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I wanted to add one thing here. I think so definitely money is an important aspect of our existence, right? We need money to survive. We need money on a daily basis to transact with each other. So that definitely is an important part of our lives. However, if I think about like, do I need Venmo? I mean, there are a lot of use cases that Venmo today does not support, right? Like getting my paycheck. I mean, somebody talked about it, but I don't know how much of a feature that is really uptaken. So from that aspect, probably Venmo is like a nice to have in their daily lives, given that it does not cover all of the use cases that I may have around handling money in my day-to-day life. But if Venmo were to cover all of that, I definitely think that it would be in a much stronger position.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a segue into where they could grow more in, right? It's not yet a painkiller for everybody. It doesn't cover all scenarios. So maybe that is a little bit of a weakness for them, that other financial services, financial institutions can fill in. Poonam.
Sorry, I forgot to.
Okay, no worries. Any other weaknesses that Venmo has?
I would like to point one out, and this was just something I experienced a couple of days ago where I needed to pay somebody. They said I can pay them via Zelle, and I don't know why I paid them via Venmo. They got a message saying they have money, but they were actually not a registered user on Venmo. So Venmo didn't let me know that this user is not when I tried to cancel it, finding the option to cancel was not very intuitive. I had to do a Google search for it. And then when I tried to cancel, it said, yes, you can't cancel it just yet. You had to wait a couple more days. So just preventing these mistakes in the first place. If it's like a large amount, the other person's not getting their money, and my bank account I did do a Zelle transfer, and my account basically has been debited twice. So that it wasn't a huge amount, but if it was, that would be a huge hit.
So their error handling could use some work.
Error handling, or even upfront looking at verification.
Yeah, validation. Yeah. I mean, money transfer is so critical to get right. So,
right.
Shruti.
Yeah, so they don't have a global presence, right? So that is one issue that people currently face. Like Venmo is just used within the United States. Like I had this issue when I had to, like I use Venmo as my bread and butter. And then when I asked my student at UK, she said like she wanted to use Revolut. And then I was like, we don't have Revolut. Like Revolut was not launched in the United States back then.
Hmm.
So yeah, like it was a little difficult at that time. So yeah, I feel Venmo could definitely do better with global presence,
Yeah,
and
it's too US centric right now.
more customers are loyal to Zelle. I noticed that too. I totally agree with what Kashmira said.
Shatama.
So I think that Venmo has more um, appeal when you are dealing with a smaller amount, right? Like thinking about, when I say smaller amount, maybe like just putting a ballpark less than $1,000. The reason I say that, there are a couple of things that come to my mind. Number one, like someone talked about, like, the account verification and all of that. Second thing, PayPal, like for example, when I am paying out, it like specifically flags, like, are you paying a friend? Are you paying a business? If you are paying a business, I mean, let us know all of those security. Third thing is BNPL, right? So I do not think that Venmo has that. I mean, I think when you are like making some big purchases from the businesses, one thing that you might want to do is to split your payments. And I don't believe Venmo does that. So looking at all of these, I feel Venmo is still geared towards like low value transactions, and not like really thinking about like, the bigger scope, which might be even like some high value transactions.
Yeah, so they're focused on the small amounts. We need some other service for large amounts. Saba and then Michelle, then I have to go on to the next slide.
Hi, yeah. So one thing I noticed that maybe I just can't find, but it's not easy for me to just have the Venmo app close itself. So like a banking app or credit card, at a certain time frame, it auto turns off and says log back in for security. But I don't know where to find that in Venmo. And I think that's a gap that if you're not intuitively good at apps like me, you're not going to realize that this Venmo app is just open. So if someone stole my phone, they can just open Venmo and they can adjust it and pay themselves and do whatnot with my money. So I find that to be a security risk. There should be some way to auto log you out if you haven't actually set stay open.
Got it. Yeah, the security is doesn't seem as strong as traditional banking apps. Michelle.
And so one of the biggest things I saw that Zelle had over Venmo was transfers are instant and free. So because Zelle is attached to your bank, it's going to show up in your bank account immediately. Venmo takes a while. Venmo charges a lot of different fees for different services and like takes a bit of multiple transactions. So something to keep an eye on is like just the charge that you might be getting through Venmo. And more recently, there's an article about that it doesn't have the same protections as a bank account or a credit union. So I think Zelle has that because it's tied to a bank, whereas Venmo doesn't.
Yes, it's not a traditional bank, so there's some risk for the convenience. All right, let's talk about the challenges and threats, because then that leads us to the fun part, which is we can brainstorm for what some potential solutions are. So where do you think Venmo's main challenge is? Is it in acquisition, for example? Is it hard for them to acquire new users, or is it somewhere else? There's a framework on the right side.
So I think most customers are coming from networking, from the network effect. Like I installed it only because I needed to pay someone, and their only method of accepting payment was Venmo. I had no other choice.
Okay, so they are getting customers through essentially referral, or the network effects, right? In order for you to receive money or send someone money, you have to also have Venmo. So is that a challenge for them, or is it fairly simple to get new users?
So I was looking at my Venmo notifications, and it seems like they're running some promotions if we invite our friends to Venmo. So looking at that, it looks like they do have some tip out there to get some new users, maybe. Just an assumption looking at that.
Yeah, so it seems like they might have some, it might be kind of a difficult question to answer because within a certain demographic, they might have a lot of saturation, right? Like people of a certain generation all have Venmo, that's all they use, is not a problem. But if they're trying to become, if they're trying to change the world, right? If they want to become global, there's still more people who've never used Venmo, who maybe never considered it, or it's, you know, not the right thing for them. Maybe that's what they're still working on.
Yeah, possible.
How do you think their retention is?
I think it's pretty strong. Like I think I signed up in for them probably a couple of years ago, and then I keep coming back, even if it's just once a year. Maybe the frequency is low, but I do keep coming back. Like I've not uninstalled if I'm in that persona group which splits, which basically they appeal to, right? So I think retention wise, I've not seen any of my peers also leave Venmo.
Yeah.
Same.
Pearl also mentioned that it's a little bit hard to use, naming one of the challenges. I had money in my Venmo wallet, but I couldn't pay using it. It said I could only pay through my credit card, which had a fee by connecting my bank. So, and I think Kashmir also mentioned her other challenges, right? With the user experience of when someone doesn't already have Venmo and not being notified that the payment didn't actually go through. Michelle.
So I think that their main use case, their funnel is actually pretty good, the peer-to-peer transactions. I think that the area that they're looking into more now is expanding their audience, right? Like they're limited to US audience, they could have potential for global audience, they're limited to let me see, like the types of transactions they have but they want to expand into crypto and like the different areas. So I think that it's actually the growth that they could work on more, the acquisitions of different types of customers potentially, because I think that their funnel, they are actually retaining people. People are going back to the app multiple times. It's easy enough to whip it up whenever there's, a group meal that people are going into, or a quick transaction, people can bring it up right away. But yeah, I think it's the acquisition and also moving into the revenue aspect. Like, how do they expand the revenue by diversifying it?
Yes, so I think that those are really good points with their C2C. Essentially, they don't make any money, right? The thing that they've nailed, they don't make any money. But they did acquire a lot of people. They seem to be working on all these other aspects where they can charge fees. So maybe it's the revenue they need help with. Sheetal.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The C2C side, they're probably fine on the funnel. One of the challenges I see is on the B2C side, which is like we talked about the gig economy and the like this, for instance, like paying cooks or babysitters and whatnot. And what I'm seeing is a lot of my regular transactions are going back to cash because they're saying that Venmo is charging fees now to those businesses. So I see a retention issue on the small business side, which I think could be a big challenge and a threat for them.
So it's still difficult on the business side. So that's something they still need to work on.
Well, they're intentionally adding that friction, right? They're charging fees to those businesses, and I think Amazon had this thing where they introduced taxes, right? Which previously, like when you bought books on Amazon, way back when Amazon was new, one of the advantages from a customer standpoint was that you didn't have to pay tax, since Amazon didn't have a presence in a lot of US states. So Venmo is having that issue now because they're charging tax to the businesses, and yeah, so it's either coming out of the consumer pocket or it's coming out of the business pocket. So businesses are telling those small businesses, right? They're saying the local chef or the local cleaner is saying you need to either pay that tax or we need to go back to cash. So I think from that perspective, there's a retention issue.
Yeah, that's definitely challenging, and maybe coming down from the government who's feeling like they're losing out on sales tax when things are, on certain transactions. But yeah, that may be why
Right.
people pay
The
with cash because it's
transactions
not
that were
reported.
outside of the scope previously, right?
So Shita,
Yeah.
you mentioned it's an intentional friction. Why is it intentional? I missed that point.
Yeah, maybe it's not intentional, maybe it's regulatory, right? Yeah, but they've added that friction.
Maybe they haven't found another way of monetization at this point. So probably that's also one reason why they're doing that.
Yeah, or maybe regulatory, to your point.
Yeah, I think there was something about, I think if you make more than, is it 600? I forget the limit now, whether it's PayPal or Venmo or somewhere else, they will report it. And then you need to deal with any applicable
I mean,
taxes.
it's interesting, even my babysitter, who's a teenager, won't take Venmo anymore.
Yeah, I think
So,
this is a challenge with anything that is not cash, right? Because there's a tax,
right.
so it makes it easier for the government to ask for their share of the taxes. Saba, and then we'll talk about what we might do to address some of these challenges.
Yeah, I think them not being FDIC insured will probably become a challenge for them in the long run if they're trying to expand to new offerings. I think people think safety again, right? Security, safety. My money shouldn't sit in Venmo if you're not remembering to hit that transfer to my bank or whatnot button. Your money's not insured in there. So how are they going to get users to feel safe to leave a lot of money in there, to transfer more money? We're generally transferring a couple of dollars here and there, 20 bucks, but why would I put $2,000 in Venmo? I wouldn't feel safe.
Okay, so the security aspect, the financial security, not just the someone in like identity theft type of security.
Can you tell I care about trust and safety?
So what would you do about it? Any ideas that you think Venmo should invest in to overcome that challenge? So one of the challenges, I mean, like we mentioned, is, hey, they're doing great on the peer-to-peer transfers, but if they wanted to become the #1 solution for all businesses, particularly small businesses, what should they be working on?
Some incentives for the businesses for sure to switch to Venmo versus whatever else they're using, right? I'm not sure what these incentives would look like, but it seems something to offset the charges that they're seeing right now.
Yeah, I think something on similar lines, right? Given that, I mean, whether it is a regulatory requirement or whether it's a monetization source for Venmo to charge these businesses, I think to make it worthwhile for businesses, right? If I specifically think about who would be the main user persona, these are like typically the small businesses who might as well like take cash, but then like for the convenience of themselves and their customers are now using Venmo. So something I think would be really helpful for them is to like if they could expand Venmo, not just having a payment mechanism, but expand it to like maybe a money management thing for these businesses. Like one of the things that I was thinking of, maybe like, they could probably have some software or some tools by which businesses can very quickly identify which are like the customers who are at the risk of like maybe they make a transaction but that gets defaulted, right? So they can force those customers to pay cash upfront. That would be a very useful thing for these small businesses, especially as they do not have a lot of capital to operate with. So something on similar lines where it's not just a payment mechanism, right? But expand it more into a money management on these small businesses side, which makes it more useful and worthwhile.
So
But wouldn't
more
that
money
affect
management.
your privacy, Shritama, if somebody's flagged as being not being very
Say, sorry,
wouldn't that be a privacy issue if somebody if they start flagging people as not being very
But to that point, that is being done, right? I mean, if you look at all of these, like Walmart and Sam's Club, they have a lot of these. When the payment happens, they typically have a lot of algorithm that's going on to identify whether this customer is a reliable customer or whether their account is being hacked. All of those things are already being done today. So it's not like this is something new that we would be doing. Ultimately, we are not doing anything wrong, right? We want to make sure that the right person gets paid rightfully. So yeah, I would say, like, even from the ethics point of view, I don't think this is wrong. And definitely this is being done by other businesses.
Thanks for your time, Michelle. And then we probably have to start wrapping up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that to get that security that people need from larger transactions, like if Venmo found a way to integrate better with banks like Zelle did, or have some sort of, I'm trying to look up, how does Venmo get FDIC insured? I don't know, it's beyond my knowledge there, but I think that if there's a way that they can get that security of banks connection, and maybe even just that integration, there's no Zelle and Venmo integration. You can't transfer from one to the other. So maybe if they can smooth out things like that, that makes it easier to be trusted and be part of a bigger federal institution, maybe they could have those protections that they need to gain the trust.
So work on their security. And then people previously mentioned also they're US centric. So maybe if they look more globally, what they can do, that might also help as well. All right, so this is just basically the last slide. The next couple slides are just extras that Jamboard just added when I was scrolling through. So thank you so much for joining. This is just like the beginning of a conversation. We will post this on our Facebook group, as well as on LinkedIn, if you want to continue the conversation.
What was the last point that you just mentioned? I was writing this up.
So international.
Okay.
Like if they look into, how they can, they're very US centric right now. So if they wanted to be number one in financial services, they should look at, maybe it's a regulatory thing, I don't know. Definitely people have mentioned in this discussion that there's a lot of UX challenges. They should invest more in there. Like the buy now, pay later could be better. The prevention error handling could be better. And that's about it. Thank you everybody for joining. I'll be around for a couple more minutes if anybody wanted to chat some more.